Surely it is hard to deny that Ronald Reagan's life was providential when we look at what he achieved in the 8 years that followed. But as grateful as I was for the tributes from such leaders as President George W. Bush and former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, the most awe-inspiring, heartwarming tribute of all came from you, the American people. Our family experienced it many times, as when we rode behind the hearse from Andrews Air Force Base to the Capitol, or from Point Mugu to the Reagan Library. Looking out the window, we saw an ocean of people, seemingly without end. Some people waved, some held flags, some wept openly. We saw the firemen's ladders arched over the freeway, draped with Old Glory, the firemen saluting my dad as his hearse passed by. I was amazed to see that not only was traffic stopped in our lanes, but the opposite lanes as well. On both sides of the freeway, people stood on their cars, waved signs, and expressed their love for my father. Throughout the entire week, there was not one moment, not one detail that wasn't absolutely right and fitting. I'll always be grateful to the members of the military who carried the casket, played the music, and fired those salutes. Every man and woman involved demonstrated both care and professionalism. This amazing outpouring of love gave us and the Reagan family so much comfort and strength. Thank you, America, for your prayers and support, which truly got us through that week, and which continue to sustain us even now. Finally, before you hear the story of how I was not only adopted into the Reagan family, but twice adopted, I'd like to share once more the words I spoke at the Sunset Memorial Service at the Reagan Library. It was Friday, June 11, 2004, just before my father was laid to rest.
Good evening. I'm Mike Reagan. You knew my father as governor, as president, but I knew him as dad. I want to tell you a little bit about my dad, a little bit about Cameron and Ashley's grandfather, because not a whole lot is ever spoken about that side of Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan adopted me into his family in 1945. I was the chosen one. I was the lucky one. In all of his years, he never mentioned that I was adopted, either behind my back or in front of me. I was his son, Michael Edward Reagan. When his families grew to be two families, he didn't walk away from the one to go to the other, but he became a father to both, to Patty and then Ronnie, but always to Maureen, my sister, and myself. We looked forward to those Saturday mornings when he would pick us up, sitting on the curb on Beverly Glen as his car would turn the corner from Sunset Boulevard, and we would get in and ride to the ranch and play games, and he would always make sure it ended up a tie. We would swim and we would ride horses, or we'd just watch him cut firewood. We would be in awe of our father. As years went by and I became older and found a woman I would marry, Colleen, he sent me a letter about marriage and how important it was to be faithful to the woman you love, with a P.S. You'll never get in trouble if you say I love you at least once a day. And I'm sure he told Nancy every day, I love you, as I tell Colleen. He also sent letters to his grandchildren. He wasn't able to be the grandfather that many of you are able to be because of the job that he had. And so he would write letters. He sent one letter to Cameron, said, Cameron, some guy got $10,000 for my signature. Maybe this letter will help you pay for your college education. And he signed it, Grandpa. P.S. Your grandpa is the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Reagan. He just signed his sign. Those are the kinds of things my father did. At the early onset of Alzheimer's disease, my father and I would tell each other we loved each other, and we'd give each other a hug. As the years went by and he could no longer verbalize my name, He recognized me as the man who hugged him. And so when I would walk into the house, he would be there in his chair, opening up his arms for that hug, hello, and the hug goodbye. It was a blessing truly brought on by God. We had wonderful blessings of that nature. Wonderful, wonderful blessings that my father gave to me each and every day of my life. I was so proud to have the Reagan name and to be Ronald Reagan's son. What a great honor. He gave me a lot of gifts as a child. Gave me a horse. Gave me a car. Gave me a lot of things. But there's a gift he gave me that I think is wonderful for every father to give every son. Last Saturday, when my father opened his eyes for the last time and visualized Nancy and gave her such a wonderful, wonderful gift. When he closed his eyes, that's when I realized the gift that he gave to me. The gift that he was going to be with his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. He had back in 1988 on a flight from Washington, D.C. to Point Mugu told me about his love of God, his love of Christ as his Savior. I didn't know then what it all meant, but I certainly know now. I can't think of a better gift for a father to give a son. And I hope to honor my father by giving my son Cameron and my daughter Ashley that very same gift he gave to me. Knowing where he is this very moment, this very day, that he is in heaven. And I can only promise my father this: Dad, when I go, I will go to heaven too. And you and I, and my sister Maureen that went before us, we will dance with the heavenly host of angels before the presence of God. We will do it, melanoma and Alzheimer's free. Thank you for letting me share. My father, Ronald Wilson Reagan.
Have you ever felt that God was angry with you? Did you ever do something so shameful that you lived in fear that someone would find out, that your secret would be exposed? Did you ever feel that something you did was so horrible and vile that God could never forgive you? Have you ever been convinced that you were going to hell and there was nothing you could do about it? Have you ever felt angry towards God? A raging anger over something terrible that happened in your life? Something that hurt you and violated you? Something for which you blame God? Did you ever hate God? Did you ever believe that God hated you? Well, that's how I felt for more than 30 years of my life. I was born out of wedlock and adopted by two people. One would become an Academy Award-winning actress. The other would become the President of the United States of America. From the time I was 3, I was raised by a single mother. My adoptive parents told me I was chosen, but the kids at school told me I was a bastard. At the age of 7, I read one verse in the Bible, and I thought it was telling me I was going to hell. I wouldn't open a Bible again until I was in my 30s. While in the 3rd grade, I was sexually molested by an after-school day camp counselor. He said it was our secret. Then he took pornographic photos of me, which he had me develop. The scariest words I've ever heard were when he bent over close to my ear and said, "Wouldn't your mother like to have a copy of this picture?" By the time I was 8 years old, I hated myself. I believed that God hated me. And as I grew from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, I sabotaged every relationship I truly cared about because of the shame, the fear, and the self-hatred that molester instilled in me. This is my story of redemption. This is the story of how I was twice adopted. Once adopted. My sister Maureen bought me for 97 cents. Maureen was just 3 years old when she went with Mom and Dad to Schwab's Pharmacy. That's right, the famous Schwab's at Sunset and Crescent Heights.